Hey guys, my name's Jagesh. Would like to thank Saleha for hosting us on Chai, Chat, and Community. Today we'll be discussing men's mental health in light of Men's Mental Health Week that began on Monday. We'll be facilitating a conversation about South Asian men's mental health, why it's needed, why the conversation exists at the moment, and what we can do to make sure that men from a South Asian background feel comfortable with discussing mental health. My name is Jagesh, founder of Shakti Mental Health Melbourne. Today we've got with us Malik, who's a community leader and activist and actor. How are you today, Oz? We've also got also got Krushnadevsinh Ravalji, Kana Ravalji, who's a youth advocate, works with young people in multicultural communities. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
Nice. We've also got Devian Panchal, who supports Shakti Mental Health as well, as a multicultural mental health advocate. How are you today, Dev?
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, guys.
Nice. So today, us four will be discussing South Asian men's mental health, as said. If there's any questions throughout the conversation, please add them as we go. Before we begin as well, I'd like to pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past, present, and emerging, and thank them for having us today, and pay respects to anyone Indigenous who's watching at the moment. So today we'll start with a bit of a question about men's vulnerability, because it's something that's come up before. So I wanted to throw to Oz at the moment and just ask him, why do you think South Asian men have a problem with discussing vulnerability, and why is it seen as weak in the community if we discuss mental health?
That's a great question, Yes. And apologies if my mic isn't that great. Just give me a shout out, guys, if it stuffs up. I think it's a problem in the community. Unfortunately, we are a community where we have complex issues, whether it's religious, whether it's cultural, patriarchal. But I think when it comes to men's mental health, the pressures, especially on how South Asian men are viewed internally within the community. You know, we're supposed to be these men who are supposed to provide for the household, and we're supposed to have good jobs. And if we don't have good jobs, we're supposed to be, great citizens in society, and just these ongoing pressures. And then on top of that, the lack of awareness and understanding about what mental health really is in the South Asian community. I know we have beautiful religious and meditative practices and different things that we can do, but that real deep conversation, I don't think has happened yet when it comes to that nitty-gritty of stress, trauma, those pressures when it comes to work and study as well. So I think that's where the effect of mental health, us in particular South Asian men, are really seen.
Definitely. And I think that vulnerability is something that men often have trouble discussing. So with their mates, with family, and how we can get forward with that is something that is going to be a changing conversation. In discussing family, there's a lot of vulnerability, and there's a lot of different dynamics when family is involved. And Kano, I know we discussed this earlier. What do you think about the dynamics within South Asian families? Is it something, did you see growing up that men were being comfortable discussing mental health, or was it something that was like kind of kept under the rug?
So I come from Gujarat, which is on the western side of India. And so, I think our culture is already quite conservative, as in the Indian culture or the South Asian culture. But then my family's a bit more conservative in the sense that we don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about the taboo topics. And growing up, especially in the South Indian communities, I think South Asian communities, it's more the men are the providers of the family. They look after everyone. Yeah. So they can't be seen as being weak. They can't cry. They can't feel stress or pressure. They're supposed to be, looking after the family, making sure they're earn enough money. They can take the family out on trips, make sure they provide for the kids. They're giving out so much that sometimes they forget to fill their own cup or realize what's actually going on inside them, because they're always trying to go outwards. And that's what I saw, I guess, in my growing up. And I didn't understand at the time. Now that I'm a bit more older, I've blessed to be, migrated to Australia. So I see the world in a different way. I've had different experiences, different education. So I see that side of where the family dynamics comes into play, where the men are seen as the leaders of the house and they have to provide for everything. Because of that, that plays a factor in not being able to talk about it. But I think also just that, again, men in general, not even regarding South Asian communities, are, known to not to cry, to not do anything. And then when we add on another layer, which is a South Asian community where we don't talk about it, it's very taboo, it gets even worse. It's like it 2x's the whole effect of it, and we don't talk about it, we don't pass it on, because our parents didn't grow up, my parents didn't grow up talking about it, and they passed it on to me, and so they don't have those conversations with me. And then now it's like I struggle, if I have mental health, to tell them that I have any issues, and then if that does come up, they don't know how to, I guess, help me out the best way.
So do you think it's a bit of a lot of them not knowing how to talk to like us kids? Is it on us to talk to our parents about, hey, we need to have these discussions? And how do you think about like asking parents, hey, we need to sit down and have these discussions? Would it be a straight up thing, or would it take time and effort for them to realize, hey, this is actually a serious issue?
I'd love to hear the others' opinion on this, but I think the way I like to see it is because I'm in a position where I've been able to, as a young person, I've been able to get all this knowledge, learn my learnings on mental health, and more broaden my awareness, which my parents are lacking. That's where I can add my little 2 cents into it. Then it's like, you can lead the horse to, the lake or whatever, but then they're going to drink it themselves. I think providing the resources to having those little conversations, then almost giving the resources and hoping they take it. And if they don't take it, figure out a different way.
Definitely. I just want to stay with family with this at the moment. Did you say something?
Yeah, just something quickly as well. We're such an image-based culture as South Asian people. Like, it's our family name, what work do we do? How do we look when we go outside to a family dinner? What is our reputation? That has so much pressure as well, because if you make a mistake, then how does that get portrayed to the community? So this image-based culture that we have of always being perfect and not showing vulnerabilities, going back to your original point, I think that's a huge issue as well. But you guys seem to be doing really good work in bridging that gap. Do you want to talk more about that, what you're currently doing?
Definitely. So I just wanted to add on to, what we're doing in the community, but just kind of go back to the family real quick. And we were talking about vulnerability and men trying to be comfortable with themselves. And I want to ask Dev, when we get into this, Dev, what do you think young males of South Asian background could be doing to have that conversation with their parents when they're at a young age? Or how do you think parents can have the conversation with young males when they're growing up in the family? What should we be teaching our young boys and girls about talking about mental health?
I think first and foremost, young South Asian males need to have the confidence to really bring up that conversation, because we know, and we've experienced it, that our mothers and fathers, they probably won't wake us up in the morning and ask us, hey, do you have mental health issues? Or, hey, I noticed, your sleeping pattern isn't as great, or you're not talking to me as much. They're not going to be the ones who initiate that conversation. So as young South Asian males, we just need to have a little bit of confidence and a bit of authority when we come to our parents and say, look, this is what I've been experiencing. It's because of X, Y, and Z reason. And because of these reasons, it's led me to have a little less confidence, or I'm not thinking as much of myself, or the value that I have in myself at the moment is at an absolute low. But we need to be able to go to our parents and say, look, these are the reasons why I'm experiencing and having this struggle. I need you to have a conversation with me. And then even that, before that, we need to make it acceptable for young South Asian males to have this conversation within our own friends group. The people that you spend your most of the time around, those are going to be an exact reflection of the person that you are. The people that you spend your value time around are people that are going to make you a better person at the end of the day. So we really need to take it back and understand that it's okay to have these conversations in our own friend circle as well. And then once we have a bit more confidence there, we can take that conversation to our parents, people that have raised us up from a child, people that have given us continual growth and support from, the day that we were born. but we need to have that confidence to initiate that conversation first of all with our elders. Absolutely.
Definitely. And just on talking about mental health with our mates, we know that men, like in our mates groups, friend circles, we don't always discuss it. So I want to throw it out to anyone. Has anyone had a personal experience with discussing mental health with their mates? Like, how have you brought it up? What has been the response from your friends? Has it been supportive? Has it taken a bit of time? What's happened when you've had these discussions?
For sure. I think within having that discussion with my own friends, I think first and foremost, you, as an individual, you have to realize that there's a problem first. I mean, if you keep doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result, that's the absolute definition of an insanity. So you need to understand and tell yourself that there's a problem first before having that conversation with your friends. And really, you want to confide in people that you trust and you get the most support from. Not someone that you see only a couple of times a week, or someone that you've just met, but people that have been with you since day one, and people that have seen your struggle, people that have experienced you missing dates or not coming to parties or missing out on events and things like that, or not making calls back. Because these are the types of friends that are going to give you direct, specific, and honest advice and let you know how you can better yourself. And I think it's just about having a casual conversation with them. It's not like you have to plan a date or have a formal Zoom meeting or something like that. But absolutely, you can just have a casual conversation. And for me, when I was going through it, I definitely just went to the close group of people, the closest friends that I had with me at the time, and let them know, look, I've been experiencing this. Have you seen or experienced, or have I let you down in a certain way because of these issues? And then it's best to go in, look, I haven't been there for you, or I've let you down, or I've missed appointments because I've been going through some rough stuff. And then if they're going to be someone that's there for you, then they're going to be all ears and give you as much support as they can.
I think it's important which friends you go to as well, because
Yes.
I know certain friends may not understand the cultural tropes of my family. Like if I go to somebody from a non-South Asian background, they'll be just like, dude, just talk to your dad about your girlfriend and that way.
Yeah.
When you Google your issues, talk about it.
Yeah, just talk about it. Yeah.
Certain issues where it's like, I think there's a barrier that comes with certain understanding, and I think I have so much empathy for, in particular, all these identities that we have, because it's so difficult with our parents in particular, where there's that generational gap as well. And then there's the community pressure, and then you've got your Australian identity, and then you've got racism and politics and discrimination. There's so much going on. So I feel like if you can find your little pockets, of healing, it's really important. But again, just that crucial advice that is understanding of your context is really crucial.
Yes.
And I'll add something onto that. I think combining both of them, I think from my personal experience, it's twofold. Where I think the first is realizing that you have something going on that you need to talk about it with, and especially because we didn't grow up with that being so accepted in our childhood. I know that if anything like that popped up, I would hide it away, or be like, nah, that's not serious, or I'm not going to bring it up with anyone because I don't know how to deal with this. I don't think it's a thing. So I think the first step is really telling yourself that I've been learned all these behaviors, which are not, they're not the best behaviors for me. So letting go of them and learning new behaviors. And it is uncomfortable. It is tough because I've been there. It's like, I don't really want to go against what I've been learned, or go against what my family's done, and go into this other world, where I'm vulnerable, where I don't feel like 100%. So I think that is the first thing of realizing that it's okay to talk about it. You got to get over that mental block. And I think going back to Oz, like we live in such a image-based society that we don't want to be seen as, I'm going through something, or I'm not my 100% right now. Because obviously you want to put your best foot outside, but sometimes you just got to be like, nah, I'm not feeling it today. I'm going to push through it. I think the other factor was, again, when I go up to my friends, with that image perception comes in, I'm like, I don't want to tell them about my issues. But the way I like to address it is, sometimes I don't say I have something on mental health going on. I'd like to just tell them, this is what's been happening. And then they sort of get the hint like, there's a lot of things happening with him. And then they give me advice. So it's something that I'm still overcoming, where I'm like, crap, I'm feeling stressed, or I'm feeling like this. I'm feeling like this.
Do you
Definitely.
think
I think just on like personal reflections. What's up?
Oh, so sorry, Jagesh. I was going to say, do you think I'll ask this to you, Jagesh, actually. Do you think the mental health term is taboo in our community? Like, if we would just change that term to something else?
Definitely. Because I think, like, they're probably, like, thinking about it, there probably is a word in, like, Hindi or Gujarati or Urdu as well, but I don't actually know what that word would be in, like, our, like, mother tongue. And not knowing what that would be or, like, how would you say it even makes that more of a challenge. And then, because like having that conversation with parents and then saying like mental health's a thing, I think it's really hard just describing if you're not comfortable as well with describing it in like your like native tongue. Saying it in like trying to describe what that is really hard. So I think there's that barrier right there. Even before we get to that discussion, so it's the barrier of how do you say it? Like, what do you say? How do you say it in a way that doesn't sound like you're like putting your parents in an awkward situation?
I think relating to that point as well, having that mental health term being taboo, I think it comes from definitely the kind of pop culture that we're surrounded around on a day-to-day basis. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen depression or mental health or suicide in that be the main focus of any sort of kind of Bollywood or Hindi representation. And you don't really see the main character. You definitely see the main character that might have experienced it, but you don't really see the main character, go to his group of friends and discuss this with his friends or discuss it with his parents. Usually you'll see the guy being like, oh, I'm sad. And then he sings a song and then he's like, he's better or he's like a stronger version of himself and he gets a haircut, then he gets the heroin or something like that. It's not something that's put in the forefront or highlighted, within our pop culture, even through music and things like that as well. So I think relating back to that, that's where it stems from too, being the mental health word being such a taboo.
And I think, it goes back to, as you said, it's not in pop culture. And because of that, or just in general, even not even pop culture, I think it's just taboo in general in our society. I think young brown men don't see the options or the solutions that they can go to. They're like, oh crap, I'm going through something. And then they almost go to the end, or they jump to a conclusion rather than, figuring out solutions, because it's not known. It's not something that we do. So I think, and then that leads to, increase in, I guess, people harming themselves, which is not what we want at all. It's because we don't talk about it. It's not as seen, not in a positive light, because you can't really, but it's not seen as like, it's an okay vibe, if that makes sense. Like, it's just another day. Oh, you got a cold? Oh, it is what it is, Like, oh, you could break your arm. Like, obviously I'm gonna look after you, but do you know what I mean? It's like, it's casual. It's not casual. I don't know. You know what do you get what I'm trying to say?
I get where you're coming from, and I think that really it can definitely go back to being scared to have that conversation with your mom and dad. It can definitely go back to what it means for the family as well, because obviously in our background in India, in our culture, marriage is held at such a high value, and the person you are is held at such a high value. So if you go to your parents and let them know, look, I'm having problems with mental health, they're going to be scared that that's going to get out into the community. And then they're going to be like, oh my God, my son, he's experiencing this. Like, it's not something, post-traumatic distressive disorder is not something you want to find on someone's biodata, And a experience with mental health is not a trait you're going to find on shadi.com or someone's biodata. It's because parents are scared of what it means for their family and their family name before they're trying to find marriage proposals and X, Y, and Z. So it can be kind of tarnishing the family name if someone understands or finds out that their son or daughter is experiencing mental health. So that's where a big taboo comes from as well.
I think with that, we've talked about what are the challenges, and we've talked about what are the signs of mental health. The next thing I want to discuss is kind of how do we find support if South Asian men have mental health, and what do they do? Do we think that more South Asian men should see a professional, and they should be comfortable with seeing like a psychologist and having that sit down with them? Or is it more that like we should take it on ourselves and have that own reflection? Also, I wanted to hear your points about it. What do you think about this? Like, do you think South Asian men should be more comfortable with finding professional support for mental health?
Yeah, I feel like a bit of both, really. Personal introspection is key as well, and even having those conversations within our own families where we see, sexism or patriarchy coming up, and seeing where we've been privileged or where we haven't been privileged. How can we help those? If we can help international students, if we can help women in our community, trying to do that, but then also seeking out support is so important. But even collectives, the work that you and Dev have been doing, and other people in the South Asian community, for me, that's so encouraging, because I'm like, well, I can go to South Asian people. They're not going to judge me. They will understand my circumstances. We can speak about taboos in a way that I can't speak with my non-South Asian friends. That's really important, because a lot of the problems and issues that we face is very niche. It's very unique.
Definitely. So, like, trying to find that community support, or finding someone who's going to understand similar things of what you're going through from like a South Asian community, I think that's super helpful in what we're experiencing. I just want to throw to a question we've got from the audience, Mehek. So she's asked, I'm curious about how your state of mental health affects your sense of self or self-esteem. Is there enough emphasis put on self-reflection for growth as a South Asian man? Dev, I wanted to throw to you with this. What do you think about self-reflection with mental health? Is it something that is prevalent enough? Have you done self-reflection yourself about it?
Absolutely. And look, it's a question for me that really does hit close to home, because in 2018, 2017, when I was experiencing persistent depressive disorder, and when I was going through what I was going through, my own self-value was at an all-time low. The need to like go see friends just wasn't there. The need to like go on dates just wasn't there, because for me, I was like, man, if I'm feeling like this about myself, what is the rest of the world feeling about me? How is the rest of the world seeing me? And I could only think of the most absolute negative things possible, because for me, inside, my self-esteem was at an all-time low, because I wasn't getting the support I needed, and I wasn't doing the things that I needed to be a better person. So then what I thought about myself, I thought the rest of the world was looking at me the same way as well. And in regards to that, like I said beforehand, the biggest step forward is recognizing, first of all, that you have a problem, and then you're going to need to change things in order to be your better self. Recognizing that problem inside is the first thing that you have to do before that self-esteem can get places, and before that self-esteem and your own image of you is getting better. No one's saying that you have to go to sleep and become the best person of yourself overnight, but it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress every day. And as long as you're doing things every day to better yourself, then your self-esteem is going to get there. I promise you, your self-esteem will get better. Your image of yourself, you get better. The way you perceive the rest of the world looking at you is going to get better. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's a gradual process.
Definitely, yeah. We can see like you're talking about your experience yourself, and it's a long journey. It's not one that happens overnight, especially with mental health. And we need that support from our community. We need that support from our friends. And I think most importantly, we need that support from like our mates around us to be comfortable with it, having that discussion as we go. I think we talked about like kind of different words that we use for mental health before. And like the closest, and maybe like Kano can like kind of back me up with this or like say something different, but the closest I've got to like mental health and talking about the Gujarati is like metaki geche, which means I'm tired. And I know I've heard that like parents say it so many times, like I'm so tired, like that just direct term. Kano, have you heard like other friends who are Gujarati or from other communities like use words to describe mental health? Is it something that
Like
happens
phrases?
a lot? Like, do they just say there like I'm having like depression or I'm having anxiety?
I think a lot of I've seen in person, I guess real life example is again same in takigechi, which means translates to I'm tired, and it's tired as in physically I'm tired, but also mentally I think it refers to there's a lot of stuff on. I can't keep up with everything. I can't get on top of everything. I'm just tired. I'm like that's how they use it. That's the word that they use, and there isn't that dialogue around. I have this, I'm feeling like this. I have this mental, I guess, this is going inside my head. They try to cover it up, not cover it up, but I think they like to say I'm tired, isn't physically tired, because I think sometimes when you're going through some things inside of your head, it shows physically, where you might be a bit run down, your posture goes down, you're a bit tired, you don't speak up as much. So I think that's what they use to refer to as I'm tired. Again, there isn't that dialogue, which I think we need to talk. I feel like we need to talk about it more often so we can have these dialogues. I know that we've been blessed to, I guess, know more about it, but I think I would be thinking in terms of international students coming over here. Imagine being fresh, not having a proper support system, not having, I guess, family, having financial issues, probably studies. You're worrying about your PR. Maybe you have so much, and throwing COVID into that, not having a job. Like how do you like navigate that? How do you even say that this is what I'm going through?
I think like relating to that, definitely with international students, especially as well. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of them, but from what I've seen, we've all got quite a few international students, uni, work, whatnot. But from what I've seen, that's the thing. They're so worried about getting that grade, getting their studies, finding a job, making sure PR is there, that unfortunately their own mental health sometimes comes at the bottom of everything. And sometimes they're putting all these things first. But really, if you take it back and focus on your mental health first, I promise you everything else is going to get better. It's not like you're going to get PR straight away, but you're gonna tell yourself that, look, there's as long as that I'm doing okay and I'm positive inside, I know that I can make better decisions, or I know like the world is definitely going to treat me better. So from my experience, I've definitely seen international students be so worried about X, Y, and Z and a million different other things that mental health, unfortunately, really comes at that last rung, of what they see. So I think that definitely it's the big thing that has to change as well.
I might ask you another question if that's okay. How would you I guess in that situation tell yourself that I need to put mental health a priority, because you have so many things in your face that you're like trying to prioritize? How do you like, I don't know, what advice do you guys, you and Jagesh as well, I guess, or even Oz, or what advice do you have like taking a step back and prioritizing your mental health?
I think like one way to prioritize mental health is I think a good way to start about it is kind of like taking time for yourself. So even if it's like 30 minutes a day when you wake up, or 30 minutes a day like before you go to sleep, or when you're at your peak time, taking time for yourself and start enjoying the things that make you happy. So if that's like cooking, if that's like basketball, if that's music, like if that's gaming, start with the things that make that you'll be in a positive mindset. Because I think from there you can start to take a step back and see what parts of life you need support with. So I think as well, especially if you're an international student and you're studying, a lot of international students don't know that they can make use of university facilities or where they're studying as well. Because through there, you can get free mental health support, because a lot of universities have a psychologist on board too. And then they have use of the facilities there as well. And I think that's for anyone, especially if you live in Australia too, using the support networks around you. So if you can go to a GP, and it also helps if you bring, like we talked about, not telling your parents and how that can be such a huge thing to go through. But having a mate who can go with you to the GP, and when you ask for a mental health care plan, because you can get 10 free sessions doing that, I think is really helpful. So if you've got a close mate you can talk to, or a close friend, and say, hey, I need to go to the GP. Are you able to come with me? Because I don't feel comfortable going by myself. It's something I think we can do just to see how we don't check out, or how we can support ourselves from like that get-go.
Thank you for that.
I add something on that as well. Like you have like the mosque, the mandir, the gurdwara. These are places where I guess as communities we go, and I would like to see, because I guess in all these religions, the idea of the soul is so important, and polishing the heart, and self-care, and all these sort of things. For these discussions to be had more, and not only on a religious, spiritual level, but getting to the nitty-gritty of issues to do with alcohol, addiction, whether it's trauma, and even stuff, and at least navigating people, or having, whether it's AA type things. I'd love to have an Alcoholics Anonymous in a mosque or a temple for South Asian men, and having certain spaces where we are talking about domestic violence. Again, having the right people there within the community, but just, I feel like mosques, gurdwaras, and temples have gone so far from the reality, what's on the ground, and we're talking about issues that are, there's wisdom there to get, but also to balance that with reality of the people on the ground. And if we can really push our community leaders to start having these important conversations, I think we will start, as Dev said, putting mental health number one, and the rest, down the list.
Just on that real quick, I want to ask Oz, so do you think that there's a space for faith and mental health to work together, or would they clash too much?
Look, to be honest, there's a lot of people, I'm a person of faith, and I know a lot of crazy people with mental health issues who are religious people. Like, you can be an atheist and an agnostic person and be, have full self-care. But from a religious paradigm, there is a lot of emphasis on, your body being your temple, your mind being your temple, your heart being your temple. Like they say, like the real Kaaba is in your heart, so reflecting that, the way that you speak to people, the way that you care, all this sort of stuff is at the center of, religions that so many South Asian people practice. So I think they can definitely work together, and prayer and meditation. Look, yoga, man. Like, we have in society saying go back to yoga and do this and meditate, and it's like our culture. If you're talking about the South Asian paradigm, we have all these things. We have good food. We have meditation. We have prayer. So we should be talking about these things more.
Definitely. I'm just going to throw to one of the questions from the audience, Aleha, who's asked, what would you say to parents like myself about mental health and supporting their kids? So from a parent's perspective, how can parents better support the mental health of their kids? Is it an easy discussion? What advice would we have for parents?
I think in regards to that, it's because parents know us so well. I think they should try and identify or look at kind of traits or changes in behavior that their son or daughter is going through. And definitely those changes in behavior might be directly attributed to mental health things they're experiencing, or might be attributed to them just having so much on their workload, or just having so much pressure on them at the moment, in regards to studies, work, and other commitments socially. I think as parents as well, we don't have to jump right into it. We don't have to jump right into it and be like, I think you're having mental health issues. I think we can just start it by having just a simple, casual conversation. Hi, my son. How are you doing today? Hi, my daughter. How are you doing today? What have you been up to? Are you still speaking to X, Y, and Z people? How's your work going? But generally actually just trying to have genuine conversations to see how your son or daughter is doing, as opposed to just being in a formality that's something we ask at the end of the day. So, and based on that, really seeing the tone of your son or daughter's answer and seeing how they answer that question in fullness to you, I think that's a really good way to start or pinpoint that mental health discussion with your elders or father or mother.
Yeah, I think we need to be, like, as parents, or like advice to parents is, they need to start asking questions that don't end with, like, I know, like I did this, like just end with, yeah, I had a good day, and then we go to our room. It needs to be questions where questions that are like about our child's interest. So like, oh, how was that like concert you went to? Or, oh, I heard you're joining this basketball team. Yes. I think it's going to be questions that are more about what that child's interests are, what are their hobbies, because from there they'll trust us more. Because as parents and as child, that trust is so hard to forge. And once, I think, like speaking from experience as well, once that trust is broken sometimes with parents, it's really hard for kids to talk about what's really going on. So it's about like really interested in what your kid's doing. And then from there, I think it's so much easier to open up more.
I might add to that. I think it's also for parents. I think it's knowing that what they're going through, they've probably had some learned behaviors that they need to unlearn, because they probably grew up in a, if they need advice right now, they probably grew up in a space where that wasn't feasible for them, or that wasn't accessible to them. So I think they need to almost equip them skill and like I think it's my heck, so do a bit of self-reflection of what's going on with my mental health, what's happening, am I okay, then how can I best serve my my kids, because they know us best. They can, once they know, I guess, acknowledge about, have their awareness of mental health grown, they can start supporting us the best way. And I think, as Dev was saying, making it open to have those conversations that are just not, oh, how are you, how was work. It's more extending it a bit more. And I think, especially in our culture, I know that where I'm from, we don't talk about relationships as much. So I think breaking down, having those more and more broader conversations around about different things, not just how's work, how's studies. That's it.
I think
Yeah,
you bring up a really interesting point there, because I was just thinking, if this generation of South Asians is, we're pinpointing, we're having that conversation with mental health, but we're pinpointing that's an issue. I think we really also have to keep in mind that our parents and the generation before us never at all had the chance to have a conversation about mental health with their, our dadi dada, their mother and fathers. Because for them, their main thing was, I'm bringing my family over to Australia, UK, Canada, whatever, to have a better life. I'm going to work as hard as possible. I'm going to work 2 jobs. I'm going to study at the same time, put my kids through uni. Mental health for them, unfortunately, I don't think that they were able to, I guess, explore it when they were growing up at our age. So I think as kids, we really do have to keep in mind that it's not something they're not speaking about because they don't want to. It's something that they're not speaking about because they generally don't know how to. Because when they were growing up, there wasn't a Shakti there. There wasn't psychiatrists and psychologists that were identified in the South Asian background. So as kids as well, when we're having the conversation, I think it's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of that back and forth. So we need to be transparent, both from parents to children, children to parents as well. I'm just going to throw to a question from the audience. So Swati has asked, many young South Asians face problems when it comes to romantic relationships and their mental health. This could be due to societal norms or pressure from family. Does the panel have thoughts on this? What do you think needs to change so that kids can talk about more freely with romantic relationships with their parents?
I think it goes back to.
You go take it.
I'll just quickly. It just goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you're not going to find an experience of mental health on our biodata or shadi.com. But I think it should be identified, because I think it'd be more approachable if there's a mother that's looking for, someone for their son, and then there's a father looking for a male for their daughter. If they understand that that potential marriage partner has had the same experience that their son or daughters have, I think, that's going to be a good pairing. Or I think it's going to be better to have that conversation about where marriage will go. If both parties will understand that, oh, my son has had this experience, or that daughter has also had this experience, that should be put in the limelight. And I think that should be discussed and open and shared about in our community in order to find ideal partnerships. Yeah.
Perfect. What I was just going to add is, yeah, so when I was talking before, I wanted to say sexuality, but I couldn't say that loud because my dad was outside. There you go. See, something that
yeah.
That's why
Directly experiencing.
That's why I'm like, oh, and things. I just closed it up. But I think there's a bit of intersectionality with mental health being a taboo topic. But I think things like sexuality, I think I come from a conservative background. We don't talk about that. Even relationships, we're supposed to have arranged marriages, career choices. Where I dropped out of uni, and that was very difficult for me. And I didn't tell my parents when I dropped out of uni. So I think you have your mental health, which is very taboo, but we don't talk about. But then we have all these things around relationships, especially romantic ones prior to marriage, sexuality, even sexual health, even exploring, who you are and everything like that. It's very taboo. So I think there's so many layers where we don't talk about mental health, but then we also don't talk about all these things or we don't get to explore them. So how can you have conversations about all these sexuality or romantic relationships with your parents when talking about it is taboo? Then also these topics are taboo. So I think it's very thick. That's from my perspective. And see, just before I couldn't say the word because my parents have more down.
Yeah.
Dude, you know, the thing is as well, like, still, I'm like in my mid-20s watching a movie with my mum, a kissing scene. We're forwarding the movie, you know, we're forwarding the film. But I think you look at things like Swati's question, and thank you for answering that, because I think the relationship problem, especially for South Asian men and women, is a huge challenge. But also, yeah, societal norms have a huge impact on that. And us living in the West or in Australia, you know, that those taboos that were spoken about, like, we can't have those conversations around sex, you know, safe sex, even like conversations about, you know, hiding your relationship. I know a lot of boys and girls growing up would say, hey, we're going to the library, but actually they were going to their mate's place and, you know, staying the night and these sort of things. But even though it's funny, the problem is this is really unsafe. We're creating a culture of kids who are hiding where they're going from their parents. If a lot of South Asian boys and girls go to the club at night, but instead they're saying they're going to Aisha's house. Aisha and you are dancing in the club, but if something happens during a night out, you know, it's better to be safe and sorry and tell your parents, hey, I'm going to go, I'll be home at this time. So everything is safe. So there's a double-edged sword with us hiding these things, and I think I hope the next generation or this generation learns that, because these can be safety issues as well.
Yeah, I think definitely. Just on that, actually, I'll go to Mehek's question real quick as well. What do you think the future of mental health will look like for the South Asian community? Do we have a long way to go?
That's a good question. It's a very broad one as well, which doesn't have, you know, a specific answer. But I think, you know, first and foremost, yes, we still do have a long way to go. And I think we can all agree the end goal is having mental health a normal conversation in our community. Having these conversations, things that we can just have be acceptable within our community instead of feeling like we're going to be judged about it for X, Y, and Z. Being able to know that it's something that we can talk about going forward. So I think it definitely still has a long way to go. I think going forward, absolutely going forward, you know, a step would be definitely identifying psychiatrists or psychologists that have a South Asian mental health background. I definitely think that's a step going forward, and really just speaking about them in the community, identifying who's there and who is going to put their hand up for support. I'm sure there's a lot of South Asian psychiatrists and psychologists, but I think really identifying those people and spreading light on them is a step in the right direction as well.
Definitely. I just wanted to be more specific with that question as well, and wanted to just throw it open again. And we're talking about South Asian men in this chat. What do we think mental health looks like for South Asian men going forward? Is it something that we've seen is changing more in a positive light, or do we think it's still deteriorating and we still need way more support for South Asian men to be comfortable with having that conversation?
I think it's the way I see it is, I think we have one group of people who are very progressive or who have this or have learned. You know, I think we're all quite, you know, we're not knowledgeable about it, but I think we have certain people and certain communities, because we're just so diverse. I think even in India or South Asian communities, we're all from, like, we look alike, but there's so much diversity, even in all of us. Some people are very progressive. Some people are still, you know, boots on the ground type of thing. So I think, I don't know how you would navigate those barriers, because there's huge barriers, even like I think it's like every 5 kilometers we get a different culture or like different, you know, things going on. So yeah, all those cultures have different factors. But I guess bring it back to, I guess, South Asian communities in Australia, or, you know, people are trying to get a bit more progressive. The way I see it is we have issues around identity. I think a lot of us have been through identity issues, not knowing where we fit in exactly. And when you have that issue going on, you almost adopt because I see some of my friends, and even I did it too. You adopt almost the way you feel like you should be as a man, or as a you don't want to be identified to your culture. You don't want to say I'm South Asian or I'm brown, like, you know what I mean? And then because of that, you have all this stigma of, now I'm going to be strong. I'm not going to use the proper language. I'm going to bag someone for their sexuality. I'm going to put them down for this. So I think that you need to erase that, which I see in our community a lot, where we put people down, or there's not. I don't think when I'm saying we, not us. I think these people who put people down because of their sexuality or because of this. So I think we need to address identity issues and telling people that, it's okay to be yourself, like whatever you are, and it's okay to look within, because sometimes we're so focused outwards that we don't look inside, which I think just having that mind frame of newly arrived people coming here, and even South Asian communities like us, where it's okay to look inside yourself.
Definitely. And just on that real quick, I think a reflection I had, like when I was younger, is I used to live like one life at home and then one life like outside with friends. So, I'd have my Indian brownness, like Gujarati identity at home, but like as soon as I left the door, especially if I went to school, like I knew I was Australian. And I think a good example is that like one time I brought like food from home, it was rice and like something else to school. And then like our friends at the time were like, what the hell was that? And they were like, what are you eating? And I was so depressed after that, because there was that huge thing of learning identity and it took so long to learn that we need to really value identity as South Asian men, and really express that freely without thinking negative about it, or thinking like what other people are going to say to us if we express something that's not the norm. And I think that just comes a lot with learning, and it also comes with having friends around you that are also going to support you with expressing yourself culturally within like Melbourne, within Australia.
And I think role models plays a huge.
Yeah, no, sorry, no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think now that we are seeing, Shakti Health, we see more physical, and we see more presence of these organizations, these people who talk about these things openly. I think when we were growing up, we didn't see those in mainstream media. We didn't see brown mental health topics being spoken about. Now we're having these conversations. We're having these presence where we can talk about these, where, it's almost okay to talk about, like, we're more than happy to talk about it. I think to my next question, it is improving, but I think it's become norm, as they were saying. It's just going to be another thing.
So I just wanted to go on to, we're coming to the end of our chat real quick. So it's about like 10 minutes to 9. To wrap up as well, I just wanted to talk about reflection questions and what we can do as men going forward. So I just wanted to start with Oz and go around the room. What is one thing that South Asian men can do post Mental Health Week or post Men's Health Week to make sure we continue this conversation?
I think I'll answer that question through Swati's question, actually, because she used the word, how do you see South Asian men using their privilege to uplift, historically marginalized voices, especially like women and girls? I think that's where it starts from, honestly. Like, even just this discussion, and we've kind of talked about how there's diversity within the South Asian community. Like, as someone in my position, what am I doing for international students? What am I doing for Uber drivers or Uber Eats guys that have come to Australia on a working visa? How am I, again, speaking up for more equality and less sexism within, South Asian communities? I think seeing where you can help less marginalized people than you is a really good place to start. And I think if we start off with of how can we help people, then it kind of reflects and we create a good community and raise awareness. So just going to help people who you think you can work with and uplift using your privilege as a South Asian man.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's like, the way I see it, it's about acknowledging we do have this privilege, but then, okay, we have this privilege. What are we going to do to support our brothers and sisters going forward? What are we going to do to make sure we're not at the pedestal? everyone else is equal in trying to get ahead as well. We're not only uplifting ourselves, but we're like a good thing. I think one of the good things we can do, especially in Melbourne, is sharing the work of other people around us. So sharing the work of creatives, making sure they're in the limelight as well, making sure we're shouting out what our friends are doing. Because like at the same time, it costs literally nothing a lot of the time to shout out what someone else is doing. And just doing that can is such a huge support that we could be doing. So we're going to go to Dev now. What is something that you think South Asian men could do post Men's Health Week to keep that conversation going?
I think for South Asian men, what we can do, relating back to what you were talking about of having that kind of being proud of your identity at a later age, I think South Asian men in our culture can really put a step forward to letting younger kids know that you should be proud of where you come from. You should be proud of your Sri Lankan, Bangladesh, Gujarati, South Asian background, and you should be proud of that at a young age in high school. Because for Jay and I, it's something that I kind of put into the limelight, when I got into university. It wasn't something that I was talking about at high school. We went to a very white public school. I'm pretty sure we were the only brown kids in our graduating class. That was very, very minimal.
Like two others.
There was like two others, okay? But even then, we didn't really speak or talk about, brown things with them as well. But I think for us at this age, we need to make it a point across to let younger kids know that you should be proud of where you come from. And yes, absolutely, bring up pakora, dal, bhat, samosas, bring that to lunch and be proud of it and tell them, my mom made this, is dope food, you should be eating it, and you should learn, stuff like that as well. Because for me, like what Jay was saying beforehand, we definitely did have kind of two sort of identities. You had that brand identity when you were at home, but then when you were out into the world, you kind of had to kind of anglicize yourself or put on, that kind of white persona and just speak about white things with people. We need to be able to let younger kids know that absolutely you should be proud of who you are. You should flaunt that to the fullest. And if other people don't like you for it, that is their problem. And you should not feel down about yourself because other people don't think you're as normal as them or as white as them. That is their problem. You should absolutely have that kind of self-esteem because we have an incredible culture. More people should know about it. So from that perspective, it's letting that younger voice and generation know to be proud of your background.
Definitely. So yeah, I think we all need to, and that's all like from community. So it's that shared notion of being proud and like being proud together as South Asians. And lastly, I want to throw to Connor with the question.
Yeah.
What's one thing?
Sorry.
Yeah. Go on.
Oh no, I'm very excited. I'm gonna keep it very simple. I think it's to just check in with yourself. I think as for moving forward, I think brown men just need to check in with themselves more and to let them know that it's okay to check in once every week, maybe every couple of weeks if you're feeling like you have a lot of work on, studies are pressuring you. Check in with yourself and check in with your friends as well. Check in with them because I think if we don't check in with ourselves, we need sometimes having the external voice. Maybe that's a friend. Maybe that's I know there's a lot of there isn't just brown men in this conversation who are watching this. So anyone else watching this, feel free to check in with your brown male friends, and just be like, hey, how you doing? How's work been? How's things been? Because from my experience, and I think similar to all of your experience as brown men, we found it's something that it's a journey that we're on and we're overcoming of being okay with talking about it, talking to more people about it, and except talking to ourselves about it. So I think just checking in with yourself.
Definitely. So I just want to quickly wrap up here with 2 points real quick. Wanted to acknowledge as well that today, Sunday the 20th, is the start of World Refugee Week, and wanted to acknowledge that the journey that a lot of refugees take to different countries to start a new life is very challenging, and it plays such a huge toll on their mental health. So to anyone listening who has been through that challenge, we want to make sure that you're not alone, and there's so many supports available to start a new life or to have that conversation with people around you. So that refugee experience, I think, is something really unique, and it's something that can't be taken to the wayside. It's something that needs to be continued with this conversation as well. And lastly, on behalf of Shakti Mental Health, we will be doing an in-person men's mental health chat, hopefully next month, that everyone will be seeing when we're going to get some more perspectives of South Asian men's mental health, These guys will be involved with a few other guys as well. So just wanted to let everyone to stay tuned for that as well. So on behalf of me, Oz, Connor, and Dev, thank you so much for tuning in today. For everyone who's been listening, sending comments, thank you to Saleha as well, who's been curating this whole dialogue and ensuring that everyone's had their say and setting up today as well. So did anyone have any last points before we leave?
I think.
No, I just wanted to. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go, Dev.
Yeah, look, I think relating back to what Kano said beforehand, I really appreciate what he said about having that conversation with yourself and recognizing that, the first step towards mental health is definitely changing your own behaviors too. And it's something that I want to reiterate as well, that mental health is not something that's going to change if you don't do something about it. As South Asian male men, we have to identify that there is a problem, and we're going to be the ones, you yourself as an individual is going to be that person to change that about yourself first of all. It's like life is not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. We all know this. So South Asian men, if we are experiencing these things, we have to tell ourselves that there is a problem. And I just wanted to end by saying that the best things you can do are the best decisions for yourself. You definitely need to just make that step, put your best foot forward first, and understand that you can change your behavior. You can always be doing better, but we need to make that decision ourselves first.
Amen.
All right. Thank you for everyone who's been in this chat today. Make sure if you are having mental health, if you're having mental health challenges, make sure you reach out to spaces like Headspace, Kids Helpline, local GPs, people in your community as well. Because the more we have this discussion, the better it's going to get for South Asian men and the wider community as well. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in today, and we'll see everyone soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.